hare and tortoise, we all have heard, or since our child age. Hare and tortoise, which were there, the first race, the tortoise wins, hare loses. Then hare comes again, say we have again the race in which the tortoise loses and hare wins because the tortoise work hard. But thereafter, in that when he did, then again tortoise says that we shall have one more race, and in that case the tortoise wins because he put the path such a way that it was passing through the river where the tortoise could not run, and the tortoise could move and the hare could not run. And in the end, they had the again last lap where both of them win. The road was such that first the hare took tortoise with him, and then when it was in the water, the tortoise took hare on his back. This is what the concise, I think, the Rathi just brought us, that we should be innovative, he should be able to adapt to the changes, should be collaborative. With this, on behalf of this organization and the committees, offer very well-deserved vote of thanks and request you all to put the hands together for Mr. Rathi. Thank you. We shall have a tea break for 10 minutes.
Because we have tried to cover this into two parts. One is to talk about various sources. Ideally, we have separate session on finance only. We have had seminars, full day seminars on just finance, talking about all possible ways of getting the finance, including there are this crowdsourcing. So last time we had a session on how to get finance through crowdsourcing websites which are there, where people, of course, this is a grey area so far as the legal provisions are concerned, but a lot of things are being done even on crowdsourcing of finance. We have with us today Mr. Paresh Mehta, who is CFO of Ashokan Buildcom, which is an infra company into roads business. And Mr. Paresh Bhai is having a very long innings so far as the financial market is concerned. He has been associated with the finance industry since 1987. His current assignment as Ashoka Buildcon is in Nasik and a road infrastructure developer. His profile includes accounting and auditing of the Ashoka group of companies, project finance, taxation matters, formation and management of joint ventures, ESOPs, legal issues and shareholders agreements, commercial dispute resolution, handling of all commercial issues in tendering, forex and risk management. I deliberately read out this thing because these are all the functions which a CFO performs, and Paresh Bhai seems to be doing all those things, and he was the first name which our committee members suggested when we talked about this seminar. They said, oh, he's a person who has been through all, and really it is a very challenging job to raise finance for infrastructure industry today, because the banks have really tightened on this industry, and all kind of advisories keep coming from the Reserve Bank of India, what to do, what not to do. So he is in really a very hot seat to manage the company's finance. Second, we have with us is Mr. Ajay Thakur. Ajay is, I think I have known him for more than 20 years, I think since he started his career with the BSc, and Ajay has really grown from various assignments that he has handled. He was initially employed with a custodian company. Then he has been part of setting up depository for Baroda Stock Exchange. So he has moved from a very big company called Stock Holding. Then he was with the Baroda Stock Exchange. And after that, he has been with BSE for almost 17 years. And he has, he started his career in the bad delivery cell. And this was the paper related objections which used to come, which is a thing of past, was really a really big job which the exchanges and the brokers used to handle. At one point of time, we had 35,000 complaints interbroker because of the bad delivery paper which was exchanged. And we did a massive exercise to clear that whole backlog. And Ajay was one of the key players. And presently he is the head of the BSE SME segment. The government has been very keen on ensuring that the SMEs are served separately, because the kind of listing requirements which are there, the compliance requirements which are there for small scale companies, I think they are too big, and that level of maturity to handle and the kind of resources which are required to handle compliance, it is too much for an SME to handle these things. Therefore, we have diluted the requirements from a normal listing. And of course, since we have diluted the requirements, people only HNI ticket or 1 lakh and above, that is the transaction size which is there. But I am proud to say that being associated with BSE for so long, BSE has really been a pioneer, and almost 35 companies are listed today. And the speed with which he is listing, I am sure at the end of this seminar we would have 38. Which is quite likely, because there are always several companies which are in the pipeline wanting to list. So we have two very resourceful speakers who have had a long series of experiences in this field, and I request all of you to listen to them keenly, and I am sure they have a lot to share with all of us. Thank you very much. Over to you, Paresh bhai. Okay, I think we'll continue with the tradition of giving our mementos before the speeches. So I request Hasmukh bhai to hand over the mementos to both our speakers.
Okay, the presentation. The presentation was, I believe, on the desktop. There is one.
Yours is this one.
Oh, this is BSE.
Which one is your
One second. Okay, fine. Good morning, everybody. Honorable members on and off the dais, friends. It's a great pleasure talking to you on this morning on a typical my day-to-day activity, which keeps me busy all throughout the year. I represent Ashoka Buildcon. I am a CFO of Ashoka Buildcon. I've been there since the last 13 years. Ashoka Buildcon is an infrastructure company. It's a road developer. On the PPP basis, it keeps on developing roads, and also a core EPC contractor. This business has been being carried on for the last 40 years. It got listed in 2010, and we undertake road projects, and we have a project value, concessions of project values of rupees 8,000 crores. We have raised private equity to the tune of almost 1,000 crores. We have raised public equity, that is IP, through an IPO, around 225 crores. We have also raised debt to the tune of almost 5,000 crores. So finance typically has been a very critical activity in a company like this, which is a very capital thirsty sector. I typically I play the role of a CFO. I assist my chairman in his policy decision making, and as well as my managing director, who for all the executive actions. And I'm also responsible to the board of directors for reporting on operations of the company. Though Mr. Rathi has very elaborately described what is the role of a CFO, I would like to just put it in a very crisp way what I believe is a role of the CFO. Basically responsible for financial planning, financial reporting, and record keeping. So this is a basic core responsibility. Also, along with that, it's ensure that all financial reports do give a very correct picture and a complete picture and well in time. A very significant role which has evolved over the past almost 15 to 20 years for a CFO is to be part of the strategic business decision-making process and assist the CEO in doing the same. Many a times the CFO is also responsible for overseeing all the operations of the company and many times directly handling procurement. A procurement for a company is highly commercial skill to handle, and many of the CFOs are given that responsibility. We also manage and materially support information technology, investor relationships, lenders relationships, and joint venture arrangements. We are responsible for managing financial risks, cost controls, and maintaining liquidity. I mean, liquidity is one of the highlights of a corporate company where, in spite of whatever your decisions are, unless you are liquid or you're sitting on cash, you will not be able to take decisions in future, in near future at least. So in short term, while liquidity is very relevant. And definitely in the course of all financial management, the CFO undertakes a lead role in resource financing. And I believe that is a subject which I'll touch upon. Though the presentation may sometime appear a bit more mundane, but let's break it through piece by piece and go ahead with it, sir. Finance sourcing. Traditionally, we were all we were financing our business through equity, and that too self-equity. So when business people started way back, whenever business started, they were using their own funds. As business grew and imbalances occurred in business ideas and finance pools, concept of debt funding came into picture. So that was where debt started playing a role in the financing. There were a set of people who had money to deploy. This money would be public money or their own money, which they did not have any application to, which were to deploy. So there were businessmen who were short of cash and they needed. So basically your financing was then structured into three major portions. One is equity, bare equity, debt, and in between we had something like a mezzanine debt or a quasi-equity. There are a typical set of investors or fund holders who are fence sitters, who do not want to take a decision today. So generally, they are the people who come into mezzanine debt or they come into quasi-debt, quasi-equity, which would typically mean either pref cap or convertible debentures, convertible bonds, who at a later date would like to be participants of the business. For a particular time, they would continue to have a yield which is constant and then take a decision. So, in the recent times, and though very much akin to our sector, there is also financing which where there is a public-private partnership concept which is playing, and there you have a typical structure of an equity. Then there could be a grant, that is a grant from the government, which is part equity funding of the project, and a debt. So the equity would include quasi-equity, and the debt would include mezzanine debt. So this is the basic pattern of funding in the present scenario, and we will go ahead making classifications of what are the options available in each type. Before going to that, I would just like to throw a light on what are the parameters for the mix which is required in an equity and debt. Though, I mean, a very standard pattern, people do call a 2:1 equity funding, debt 2 times of 1 time of equity is a ideal funding requirement, but it would change from business to business. It all depends on the business which is being carried out and at what stage the business is. If it's a very matured business, typically you would end up doing a sub 1 debt equity, where it's a manufacturing kind of a setup. But typically in an infra kind of a company where I am involved in, we typically go to a gearing almost to the extent of 4:1. That is 20% equity, 80% debt. So I would not be scared if my balance sheet throws up a number of 3:1 on the debt equity or even 4:1, provided my cash flows are sufficient enough to support the servicing of the debt as well as the equity. In the present scenario, when you have long-term projects where, you may call it road projects, you may call it port projects, where there are concessions given out for years like 25 years and 30 years, you typically end up doing funding to the tune of 75-25. So this would be a standard pattern. So on a consolidated basis, typically infra companies end up doing a 3:1. A situation not really to be scared of, but definitely need to be very sure of the cash flows panning out. As I said, peer funds also very relevant. You could have equity funds which are finite, like private equity players who want an exit within 5 to 7 years' time. And in the debt side, you could have debt from 5 years debt to at present 15 years debt, which is provided by financial institutions. Or there could be bonds which are 20-year bonds which fund projects. Very critical item, the cost of funds. We have, as Mr. Rathi said, equity is one of the costliest funds, and typically even the private equity players demand a return of 18 to 22%. So equity being the costliest, you always try to leverage on equity by replacing it with debt as far as possible, by still maintaining a reasonability of servicing of the debt. So typically on the debt side, you could end up paying a interest cost of almost to the tune of 15 to 18%, which is very pure Saukar's interest rates. But on the institutional side, generally you'd have 12 to 14% interest rate. What we have seen in the infra space is the range is around 10 to 12.5%, which generally funds are available, because cash flows visibility is substantially high in infra projects. And it could go as low as 8.5-9%, where projects already have a good visibility. I mean, there are already established cash flows in the projects, where then you could do a securitization of cash flows and raise debt at 8.5, 9, 10%. Of course, this could be mix of instruments like domestic funds. It could be ECBs. It could be bonds. It could be long-term bonds where the contributors to the people who are investing in the bonds, they are typically insurance funds, pension funds, which will come to at a later stage. Both these instruments, the debt and the equity, the cost of funds could also be highly volatile due to the marketability of the instrument in which it is carried. Suppose it's a term loan, typically because the marketability is very low, you generally pay a higher cost. But if it is in the form of bonds or equity, which are typically tradable or listed, they typically demand a lower rate of return, because the investors have an ability to switch and to monetize their investments in an easier way. The liquidity is high. The cost of funds typically, how do you determine? Because the complexity of the businesses have become so high that for every person to define a cost is difficult. So what we have evolved is a rating process, where there are agencies who typically rate those instruments. They may be either debt instruments or equity instruments which are rated. And I mean, there are institutions, 4 or 5 institutions like CRISIL, CARE, Fitch, and few more smaller ones who do rate financial instruments. And these then provide like a AAA paper would get a commercial paper rated. A AAA rated company would get a commercial paper at, say, 10.5% or even lower. Today's markets are tight, but otherwise they would get something lower than even 9.5. Whereas A minus would be around the range of 11.5. So this is on the CP side. Maybe on the debt side, the term loans, where because of the Basel rating, the range of right from a triple B plus, which is an investment grade, to a triple A plus, the range of interest rates provided by these by the public sector banks or private sector banks would range from the range of right from base rates of 10.25 to almost 13.5. So whenever we take a decision of what the mix of debt and equity needs to be there, we have to delve on these 3-4 aspects of period of funds being available, the cost of funds being available, and what is the marketability of the instrument under which the funds are being available. On the equity financing, as I said, basically equity financing could be in the form of proprietary funding, that is own funds, which is either in the form of self or in the form of partnerships where two groups come together to fund equity. It could be in the form of public funds. Public funds would be in the form of listing of those companies with stock exchanges, domestic or international. And there's another source evolving, that is the trust format. Though the charitable trust format has always been there in the past, but the business trust format in a very structural way is evolving in the recent times, which we'll touch upon. And third and not least, equity could be available through a priority equity funds. So these three sources are the major sources of equity funding. I would typically not go for private for proprietary funds because these are typically, there's nothing new about it. But on the public funds, listing is one of the major opportunities available. You get listed at BSE, NSE, even at AIMS or International Stock Exchange in the forms of GDRs and FCCBs, which in future get converted into equity of the company. On the trust fund, you have charitable funds, the basic source being donations and grants which are available, but these are something which we will not delve on because these are not cost attached, they are philanthropic sources of funds. And secondly, the business trust. On the listing, IPOs, now if you go to how you go about doing a listing, an IPO is one of the first way we go for listing. We have a process of appointing a merchant banker, we appoint lawyers, we appoint valuers to value a business. We then, with the help of the lawyers, we prepare a red herring prospectus, which is listed, which is then filed with SEBI. We, at the time of opening, we identify anchor investors, which take up almost to the tune of 25% of. They commit 25% of the equity to be offered to the public. Once we open the issue, there is a process of allotting shares, and equity is raised. The valuation, the bandwidth of the pricing of the equity all depends on how the valuations have been arrived at and what is the most comfortable and amenable to the market to take up the shares at which value. Post that, there is a huge responsibility on the company, basically on the CFO to vis-a-vis compliance. There are compliance on the SEBI side, there are compliance on the stock exchange side, constant reporting on actions by the promoters, their investments, their transactions on the, and also the key personal management of the organization. You have corporate governance norms which need to be followed. As Mr. Rathi said, corporate governance is very high on the agenda of any CFO or any company, typically which are listed. And the more the corporate governance, the more amenability of investors to invest your company. Transparency will play a long way in defining your investors club. So IPO is one way of, and of course, post an IPO, if you still require funds, like a company like ours, who's typically into developing assets, and we are always requiring equity. An FPO could be another route. FPO is almost a similar route like an IPO, but here the price of the company share is already determined. So it's a matter of only searching for an investor. This investor could be in a form of a QIP, which is a qualified investment portfolio, who invests, it's not typically offered to the public at large, or it could be a rights issue where you offer it to all the existing investors. So an FPO is another better route. Other than FPO, you have GDRs which you could place outside country and raise money, and then probably at a later date the GDRs get converted into equity and they become members of your company. Another aspect which I touched upon was the business trust. Now, business trust is gaining a lot of popularity for funding assets which are very highly capital intensive, and definitely there is a shortage of equity and even debt capital in the country. The kind of investment the government is envisaging on infra development, talking of $1 trillion in a 5-year plan. They have had that in the past too, but they have never achieved anything close to that. But the plans are still there. So raising money through a business trust is a very good alternative. One of the major destinations of registering these kind of trusts is Singapore, where people are establishing business trusts. Business trust typically aims in funding the debt and the equity both on by long-term investors. So typically, if a project is funded in a debt-to-equity ratio of say 3:1 in India, what you try to do is you try to list it on the stock exchange in Singapore, and not stock exchange, it's a business trust. You just create a business trust, you search for investors, they invest, so they replace the debt, they replace the equity. But typically what these investors are all long-term investors. They are typically pension funds or insurance funds who have long-term funds, and their expectation of return may not be as high as the lenders who have in India, like 12.5. They could be in the range of 8 to 10%. So what typically the goal of the company is to replace a 12.5% fund by 8.5% fund, and the only challenge here is that the yield expected by the investors is constant. So they require cash on the whole. So when you are listing the whole debt and equity, you need to service all the equity, also the equity at that particular rate. So when you are doing a domestic funding, typically the equity is serviced only after the debt is paid off. Rarely there is a situation where the equity has an opportunity to get any money when the debt is going on in an infra project. So a business trust gives that window open where the equity as well as debt, both are funded, but the cost of fund significantly goes down. The structure of a business trust would be typically the sponsor, that is the person which is doing the project, and the investors. They come together. They invest in a business trust. There is a trust manager who works for a trust manager. The trust manager and the sponsor typically are the same because the sponsor is running the business. So he's also managing the business of the trust, and as he's also the sponsor. The business trust typically owns the asset, and cash available at the SPV level, which has the asset, which is throwing the cash, gets flowed into the BT and then goes to the investors. Just noted down what exactly the business trust offers investors: an option to invest in cash generating assets, including infrastructure assets, real estate assets, transportation assets. The main parties involved in a BT structure are a BT, that's the business trust, the unit holders, and the trustee manager. Trustee manager is both the trustee and the business manager. So he also is the custodian of the funds and also runs the business. Business trust is a pure cash flow structure. Certainty on distribution of cash flow is a must for BT. A yield play valued for cash flow plus growth. So that means typically a minimum yield has to be assured, and then there could be a top-up. The moment there is a top-up opportunity, generally what happens is the business is valued at a higher rate and listed. So the sponsor, the existing sponsor, gets a better value for the business which is putting into a business trust. Unlike a company, this is slightly different from a company. A company can distribute dividend, or typically the yield which is available to the investor will happen only if there is a profit accrual in the company. But in a trust, the profit is not a necessity. It's just distribution of the cash available. So that's a big comfort in a trust, where without profitability also, if the cash flows are there, you can distribute dividends, because based on our company accounting policies, we have to provide for many expenses like depreciation typically, which typically in the initial years are very high and tend to keep the P&L always on the debit side. There are numerous BTs listed on the Singapore Stock Exchange in the shipping as well as the port side. Sorry. On the private equity side, we at Ashoka Buildcon have handled 3 bouts of private equity. One was way back in 2006 when we raised 100 crores. Then one was in 2008, we raised 214 crores at the SPV level, one of our SPV levels, which has projects, road projects in the SPVs. And then in the recent past, we raised around 800 crores from Macquarie, SBI Macquarie joint venture private equity trust. So basically, private equity is a collective investment scheme. So here you have a asset management company which runs a fund. The fund is typically invested by long-term investors. They're called LPs, limited partnerships. So that's how they are defined, as the LP members of the fund. And the private equity players generally look out for a entry and exit of 10 years. And the rate of return expected could be in the range of 15 to 20%. So it's a very costly capital. When you negotiate with a private equity fund, you have to typically negotiate very hard because their expectations are very high. But once you have arrived at a typical value for your business, where you want to invite the private equity, then the transaction goes through various options, like you have appointed a merchant banker, then you have the valuations in place. Major then item which comes up is drawing up a term sheet. The term sheet is a basic document which typically, post-valuation, typically takes care of the relationship, how is going to be handled between the private equity investor and the existing sponsor or the existing shareholder. Once a term sheet is drawn, it's not a final commitment. They also go through a diligence process. They would appoint financial diligence people, like maybe generally all these foreign private equity players appoint the big fours for doing financial diligence. Then they would also appoint technical diligence people, like if it's a road project, then engineering consultancy firm would be appointed to validate the quality of road, the cost of the road, the cash flows which are going to pan out due to toll-able traffic. So these functions are typically vetted by a diligence team who they report directly to the private equity investors. Based on this, the term sheet could go slight variance from the point of view of valuation, maybe, because if the information they find is slightly different from what we envisage, that is what the shareholder envisages, then it could go to a slight change in the valuations. Once that is done, then you appoint lawyers who draft shareholders agreement and share subscription agreements. This goes through a long process. Majorly, private equity investors are very fussy about certain board rights, affirmative votes, which typically give them right to prevent the shareholders, the managing shareholder, in certain actions, or they would want the actions, if they are to be done, with their full consent. So even though they may not have a controlling stake, they may have, say, 10%, 15%, but they will have certain rights on certain decisions which cannot be taken by the existing shareholders due to mere higher shareholding. So even they have more than 74%, they cannot change the capital structure. They will insist for a board seat. They will have a veto right in every decision making where there is a raising of debt or enhancement of debt or change in the business policy or settlement of or going into a litigation process. So various veto rights will be there with the private equity players, which typically our experience in the last 3 transactions we have faced is they are not so fussy about it practically, though on the document they are very fussy, they want all the rights, but practically they are very understanding of the business process. If you are very transparent and you keep them posted on everything which is happening with the company, which have significant impact. I mean, maybe day-to-day matters may not be discussed, but otherwise which have significant impact. And it typically gives them a lot of comfort in approving any decision required by the managing shareholders. And typically here, the major connect between the existing shareholders and the company and the private equity investor is the CFO. He is the communication link between the two. Generally, a private equity investors will not frequently interact with the promoters or the CEOs. They will typically want to go through the CFO route, get the basic information, what they would like to interpret, and once they are through, then they would probably take it in a board meeting. So the CFO's role in communicating data becomes very, very critical. What he communicates, how he maneuvers the transactions such that it doesn't create a scare with anybody. Because business decisions are wrought with ups and downs. You cannot have smooth sailing all throughout. So there will be phases when you will have extreme liquidity crunches. In the present scenario, you have extreme economic downturn happening, revenues falling, and due to events which are out of the control. In a business like ours, where we are tolling traffic and business going down, definitely toll revenues are going down. So, and as a business, because we have been there for the last 14 years in toll business, we have seen the ups and downs. So we are conscious of it, and we are not very perturbed. Though a longer term of negativity would take a hit on the balance sheet, but otherwise we have seen ups and downs happening. But this communication with the private investors is typically very essential to keep them in the flow. So we have a private equity who invested in 2006. Now almost 7-8 years have passed, and he's still invested with us. He's not left because he has faith. The markets typically, because we are listed, the markets have typically undervalued most of the company shares. But the private equity players know the value is there, and they know, I mean, markets will turn sometime and they'll make money. So private equity making money is very essential, and in business like ours, they need to make money because we will keep on raising funds off and on. So we have to give a comfort to all the potential investors of private equity also that money will come through. So the major role to be played by CFO and the company. On the debt side, I mean, this is what we discuss on the equity side. On the debt side, we have two types of funds which typically are required in the business. The working capital, short-term ones, there's working capital loans. Working capital very standardized. It's based on a margin, net current asset margin. So a very standard mode of funding. Only warning typically which we as a CFO generally I keep in mind is working capital funds never to be deployed for long-term funds. Addition of this kind would typically lead to a crunch with the company. The company can stop functioning. So should be very conscious that long-term funds are funded by long-term requirements are funded by long-term funds only. So working capital should be very religiously stuck to for only working capital. Working capital could be replaced by commercial papers. Now, commercial papers is a typical instrument which is a rated instrument, generally very easily rated for a listed company, where they are in the range of 3 months to 12 months. And because they are tradable, their cost of funds is substantially low. A company like commercial paper rated A- could easily get funds at 10.5%. I mean, AAA could get 8%. So commercial paper is a good replacement of working capital financing. On the long-term side, a very typical fund source which a CFO needs to be very conscious and careful in how he selects what source of funds he selects. There could be one of the traditional funding is term loans from public sector banks or non-banking finance companies. These are for project-based generally, or for in kind of a manufacturing company for setting up the plant. So these terms could be like in a manufacturing plant, it could be 7 to 8 years of funding. But in projects, typically these term loans need to be for more than 20 years. But what we find in our countries, typically these term loans are not available for more than 15 years. So a huge gap is there in term loan funding in the country, where we need to, the banking system has to evolve in funding projects where the project life is 25 to 30 years, and probably it cannot break even in say 15 years time. So if you try to put those cash flows in 50 years, it's quite a stress, and the equity shareholder in that does not get any money. In certain cases, they have to put in a bit of money to service the lenders. So term loans are typically available at a higher rate of interest. They are in the range of 12.5% to 14%, depending on project risk profiles. Sometimes equity is also funded. Part of the equity is funded through mezzanine term loans, which are 1.5% notch more than the term loans, but and they are secondary to the senior lenders. So this is another source of funds. So the term loans and mezzanine term loans, you could always replace it with ECBs and FCCBs, but they are typically affected by exchange rate movements. So need to be very careful. If you have some underlying business which is supported by exports, typically ECBs help out. Otherwise, if you do a hedged ECB cost funding, you would end up hardly a percentage less than your term loan funding, and in today's markets. Because the country risk typically, in a hedge cost, we have two components. One is the spread which the financer enjoys, and one is the country risk, which every hedging process involves. The hedging premium for India is substantially high. It ranges in the range of 4.5%, which typically, if your LIBOR is available at say 1%, say 0.5% to 1%, you do a spread of 4.5% and you do another spread of hedging cost of 4%, you end up doing funding at 10%. So which is typically not really very advantageous. And unfortunately, ECPs in a long-term kind of project, ECPs are available only for 10 years. You don't have 7 to 10 years. So typically in a project where you require a 15-year finance, an ECB has to be guaranteed by a step-in banker who at the end of 10 years will take up the loan and repay the ECB. So ECB is good for companies where your debt profile is less than 10 years. It makes sense. Otherwise, many players are, due to the export business they have, they can get funds at almost 6.5%, which is real cheap money is available. Other forms of instruments of term loans could be in the form of debentures. Debentures are typically could be 15-20 years, and they have a rate, but because of the tradability, they fetch a lower rate of interest. We have bonds. Bonds are typically coming into the picture. The government is also declaring many bonds which are tax-free bonds, but these have been presently restricted only to institutional players, financial institution players. I think so they'll go down to even infra players where tax-exempt bonds are required to fund projects, because funds are monies are typically not available at a lower cost in infra projects. There are two more instruments which are typically available in long-term financing is a takeout finance or credit enhancement schemes. A takeout finance is typically schemes launched by the government wherever bankers have reached their total amount to be funded for an infra sector. You have institutions like IIFCL who steps in to take out the finance of the banker, so he gets his funds released to deploy for newer projects. And these funds are available at cheaper rates, almost 2.5% lower than the commercial bank rates. So this is another good scheme, takeout finance scheme available from IIFCL, typically available for only infra projects. And another is a credit enhancement scheme. There are certain institutions which there are something like IIFCL. They guarantee the top 20% of the debt liability as a credit guarantee scheme. So what happens, the risk profile on that debt substantially goes down because 20% is guaranteed by a third-party institution. So once you get it guaranteed, the banking institution can give debt at a very lower cost. So these two routes are also available to fund long-term loans and replace them with lower cost financing. End of the day, I would only say whether it may be equity or it may be debt. Always do your best, of course, negotiate your best, but promise less and deliver more. If every time you deliver more than what you had promised, you end up getting more investors in your profile. So that is that needs to be the bottom line. Ki deliver more than what you have promised. That's all I would like to say on this presentation. If there are any questions, we can always take it post the next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paresh Bhai. I think new concepts you would have learned, which is the business trust, which is not so very popular. We have heard of alternate investment funds, but this is a new concept listed on the Singapore exchange. Good way to raise money. And of course, lot of trade finance is happening in the Middle East also. If you have got any export business, lot of companies are now shifting their export through Middle East companies and raising finance. Of course, there is, as Paresh Bhai rightly pointed out, there is 3 to 4% cost of hedging, which is there. But the finance is so cheap that it is much, it is easily available and much cheaper even after taking the cost of currency coverage which is there. So increasingly, I think you have to just look around. Simple thing like just